diversity and inclusion. Are you doing it right or are you doing it wrong? Hello, my name is M.Refaat. I'm a leadership speaker and self-mastery coach. And today I wanted to pose an important question for you about diversity and inclusion. Are you doing it right or are you doing it wrong? You see, I'm an Egyptian, I'm an Arab, I'm a Muslim, and for my entire career I've worked in multinational companies, but the branches I've worked for have always been in my region. So it's always been predominantly male, Arabs, Muslims. I didn't necessarily feel out of place when it comes to like ethnicity, skin color, and religion and such. But I've always felt quite a big difference and removed from the people I worked with because of a difference in personality. So I didn't always easily fit in with the type of behavior and attitude and the general personality styles that were required in these organizations and this region in general. So the issue about diversity and inclusion has always been a personal interest of mine, because I've personally felt those problems and that pain of not being included. So I read a lot about the topic and I've delved into it a lot, and I noticed a few points that could easily throw off a manager or a leader from doing diversity and inclusion properly, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. So let's just go through those few points and break them down, starting from the beginning of what exactly is diversity, and that's kind of like the easiest point about it. Diversity means difference. So you've got differences, you've got people with differences in the same group, and that difference could be skin color, could be ethnicities, could be language, could be religion, just different cultures, and the most maybe obvious one is gender, so males and females, men and women, and then you got also differences in just the general experiences, so diversity of experiences, people who've done and been around in different regions and in different jobs. And the one thing in this point that a lot of the times might go wrong is that managers and leaders take care of diversity and differences in the mix of the group they are leading when it comes to things that they can see. So as I said, gender, skin color, ethnicities, and so on. But they miss the point about diversity and the differences in personalities. So you also need to have a mix of differences when it comes to how people approach work, how people handle creative assignments, or different words of creativity, innovation, problem solving, just how brains and minds and emotions and the different attitudes and personalities might operate in the workplace. You need to also have a different mix of that. And that's the first point where something might go wrong, but that's the least of the problems, because it's quite an obvious one. The rest that I will tap onto now with you are a little more subtle, and so you might not notice them as they happen, or as you inadvertently fall in those traps. So diversity is having a lot of differences in your organization or your team. Okay, so that's easy. But then comes the next point, which is very important, is that you need to ask yourself, what makes those people with those differences special? What makes them actually different, or what makes those differences relevant to the workplace? So what does that mean? For example, let's hire more women. We need more diversity in gender on our team or in our organization, so let's hire more women. So why? What makes women, and I'm not saying why as in I don't want it to happen, I'm saying you need to ask yourself, what makes that difference in gender, being female, special? What is it going to add to the team? So first pitfall here is that a lot of people don't ask that question in the first place, and I'll give you a few more examples. Second thing is that you might generalize those characteristics. So you say, yeah, I'm going to hire a woman or hire more women because women do so and so and so and are characterized by so and so and so. And that generalization in itself is kind of stereotyping and could be construed as or seen as sexist. So that you shouldn't do that. Or for example, if you say I'm going to hire more Arabs or people with of different skin color and or ethnicity, and you say, yeah, because those people do this or that, and that's why I'm hiring them, and that's just racist and again stereotypical, or being stereotypical. So you shouldn't look for those differences in a general way, but you need to look for those differences per individual. So when I hire a woman, and because I need more gender diversity on the team, and as we're building that relationship or during the hiring process, and look at the individual, what different thing is being a woman is she bringing to the table by being a female, by being a woman? Because if you just keep at the cosmetic superficial level, those things don't really affect work, and that's not really having a diverse culture in your team. So it doesn't matter that she's a woman, that she can bear children or breastfeed. These things don't affect the workplace, but there definitely is something that in everything in her history, her background, the way she was raised, her whole identity as a woman, that makes her different than a man, and that is something you need to identify, because you need to capitalize on, because that's the point about diversity. That's what gets us from diversity to inclusion. So again, if for example, you're going to say on my team or in our organization, we've got a diversity of nationalities. We've got people from many different nationalities. Without generalizing and being racist or stereotypical and saying this nationality brings such characteristic to the table and this nationality brings such characteristic to the table, you need to look into the individuals. I have people with 3 different nationalities on my team. What's special about each of them? What are they bringing to the table? Not a generalization, but an actual something identified in the individual. Because just the fact that they speak a little differently than me or they look a little differently than me is not the point. The point is, what about them? What about that difference in them makes them special? Because that is what I want to capitalize on. I want them to bring it to the table. I don't want them to hide it. I don't want a woman to come to work and act like a man, like everybody else on the team, because then the only difference she brought to the team is how she looks. I don't want different nationalities and the only difference they bring is how they pronounce English or how they speak. I want them to bring what's truly unique and different about them to the table. So that's a very important point we need to notice, is when you do the whole diversity thing, you need to look at what really separates those individuals from the rest of the group. What makes that thing about them that is different, for which I hired them, or not for which I hired them, but for what makes them diverse. What makes them different? Because of course I'm not going to hire a person only because of diversity. It's also because of competency. But the thing that makes them diverse, I need to look into what that thing is and what it brings to the table, because that's what makes them unique, and that's what makes them that much more valuable, and that's what makes diversity in a team that much more impactful. So you need to look into that per individual, because that's what takes us to the next stage, which is inclusion. So you need to take that thing that's unique about them and capitalize on it, foster it, have them do more of it, encourage it. Don't suppress it because it's different, or don't suppress it because it's different than you. And this is where the problems really start to happen. You do the diversity and you have those differences, and you got the mix in the team, and then maybe you even look into what makes them different. But when push comes to shove, you don't really ask them or help them or foster them to actually shine through that or bring more of that to the table. That's what's going to make that team more powerful, when it capitalizes on those differences. But when you don't, which is what happens most of the time, because when we're in trouble, when we're struggling, when everybody's at maybe each other's throats in a friendly way or non-friendly way, I don't know, when we're put under pressure, when sales are not happening, when there's any troubles happening, when we are in a conflict, when we're in a disagreement, we eventually start to defend our own points of view and oppose those points of view that are different from us. So you start in a nice, healthy way doing diversity and inclusion, and end up suppressing what made those individuals special and different and unique in the first place. So notice that when it comes to inclusion, you need to foster those differences. You need to really encourage bringing those differences to the surface and more of it, because that's what true inclusion and the true power of inclusion lies, where the true power of inclusion lies. Now comes the final and the most subtle point of all of them, and where a lot of even more managers and leaders might fall in that trap, which is bias, just plain normal human psychological bias. So what about that? So it's safe to assume that everybody who's watching this video is a human, unless this is, decades in the future and you're a robot or an artificial intelligence, and that's neither here nor there. It's a topic for another video. But humans, by nature, we have these biases. We tend, our minds, with really not that much control from us, tend to look for signs and look for things that prove us right and prove our beliefs correct, and either dismiss or interpret away, explain away the things that could prove us wrong. Because that's what your mind does. It wants you to always be comfortable, always be happy, always be correct. So here's the thing. If I'm a manager and I focused and I'm conscious of having diversity on my team, of gender and ethnicities and different, all nationalities and all these things, and I have a diverse group in my organization or my team, and I've encouraged and looked into what makes them unique and different, and then I've tried to encourage that to come forward. Now, here's the problem. If I don't do this consciously and all the time and question my own biases, here's what might happen. On a normal day, in a normal conversation, I'm never going to go tell an employee that, for example, a female employee or a woman on my team, I'm never going to go tell her that she shouldn't do this or that, because these are traits or characteristics or attitudes of a woman. Oh my God, HR would be down your throat, and you'd be out of the company in less than a day. Correct? You can't go to tell something like that. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but everybody's aware of that. So that is absolutely correct. You shouldn't go tell a woman that she can't do on your team, that she can't do this or that, because that's just woman stuff. That's just how women do it, and that's not correct. Or you need to not be so sensitive. You're a woman, you're so sensitive, you shouldn't be. Or you shouldn't be so soft. I appreciate and understand you're a woman. I mean, you're a little soft. You shouldn't be that soft. You can't say those things because it's wrong, not just because the HR is going to be down throat, but it's just wrong. You shouldn't do that, and you shouldn't say that, and you shouldn't think that, but everybody knows that. So nobody does it, or at least most people don't do it. But here's the problem. The problem is that maybe if that person isn't critical about his own thoughts, and I'm saying his because, if the woman was a manager, then they'd both be similar, and the woman manager wouldn't have a problem that much with what a woman employee is doing. But I'm saying when the employee is diverse than me, different than me, and they're doing something I wouldn't do, and it's not how I would do it, I can't go tell them that and attack their personality, so nobody does that. But what could happen, what your mind could do in that situation, is later on, something in her performance is not quite good. Not something is below the expected performance measures, and then my mind starts to attribute that to her being whatever characteristic about her because she's a woman. So I wouldn't go say you shouldn't be so sensitive because you're and that's just how women are, but you need to toughen up a little. You can't say that. But what would happen is that down the line your mind would pick up on for example, disagreement or that happened between her and a colleague, or a project that didn't meet a deadline, let's go with that one, a project that didn't meet a deadline, and then you start unconsciously, and this is what I mean by your mind does that trick because of bias, your mind starts saying, okay, so without you consciously knowing this, she didn't meet the deadline because she wasn't able to, push, don't know, like John from accounting or whatever on releasing the budget and time. And so that's because she was kind of soft on him. So when you sit with her and give her feedback, you'd be saying, you need to be a little more tough with those people like John. He's whatever, he's a little aggressive, or maybe he's just doesn't listen that much, or he just needs someone to push him, or whatever the case may be. But that's where I think the problem was, and you need to push him a little more, and maybe not be so soft when people when you need to do that differently. And that argument sounds much more acceptable. It has to do with job deliverables. It has to do with the work. And she didn't do the work, and she didn't meet the deadline, or she was later than the deadline. And it's obvious that there's a KPI, there's a key performance indicator, there's a measure of the quality of work that was not met. And you're attributing that to something that, and there's everything there in the situation that you can explain it. But for her, what she's feeling is, I basically need to be a different person to get this thing done. Now, this is a tricky topic, and this is kind of sticky, because a lot of people hearing me would be like, yeah, fine, so what? So something in the work needed to be done, and a certain characteristic stopped her from getting that thing done. So hence, that's where we need to solve the issue. But if you go back and think about diversity and inclusion, whether it's because she's a woman or because she's a different type of personality or whatever it is, but this person, this employee is different than the rest of the team, because what makes her unique, what makes her special, is that kind of sensitivity. And that sensitivity helps us a lot, maybe in team coherence, maybe in empathy, maybe she's really a good coach for her other employees. There's something about that kind of sensitivity that makes her attuned to some subtle cues in a meeting room that helps her, guide a better discussion, or notice where a problem might be, or pick up on some kind of brewing conflict that's happening below the surface between team members. There's something about that characteristic that is very useful. And if we start pushing her to let go of that characteristic, then we're not really doing inclusion. Now we're just, again, putting everybody in one big blender and turning them out into a homogeneous, unidentifiable mush. So you need to recognize diversity in those differences, and then what makes those differences actually unique, and what we need to capitalize on, and then start to actually foster those and capitalize on them. But the very, very big trick is, and the real problem is, because nobody notices it, and there's always something to explain it away with. You can always make the argument. There's the deadlines that weren't met, the quality that was not met, and you can always attribute that to a situation. And you can always come, when the employee says, but that's not who I am, and it's really feels uncomfortable, and it would be very different for me to change who I am. And the easy answer is, yeah, I'm not asking you to change who you are, but adapt, be agile, try to change a little, and work this, whether work within the system and recognize the challenges that are facing you. And this is what growth is, and this is what stepping out of your comfort zone is. And we start saying all those things. And the problem is that all of that is correct. None of that is wrong. Yes, she would benefit from stepping out of her comfort zone. She would benefit from stretching herself a little. That would actually be a good opportunity for growth, because she would get used to that. So the problem isn't what we're saying. The problem is why we are saying it as a manager or as a leader. And that's what I meant by we need to check our own biases. So yeah, true, this might be what she needs to do. True, this could be an opportunity for growth, but is that really why I am telling her those things? Is that really why I'm telling her those things? Or am I telling her those things because, without noticing, I'm just trying to push her back to conformity? I'm trying to push her back to fitting in how I would do things. And so I would just be countering everything about diversity and inclusion that I began with. So notice what diversity is and how to look for those unique traits and what makes people unique, and then include that and foster that. And finally, check your own biases. Are your biases leading you to look for opportunities to say, haha, so the thing I didn't like about you or is different about you is actually causing problems? That haha thing is not going to happen consciously. It's going to happen unconsciously or subconsciously without you noticing it. But that's where you need to critically think and judge your own actions. So next time you're sitting with an employee talking about something that is not good about their performance, about their work, and attributing that thing to what makes them different, attributing the problem in that performance to something you didn't approve of in who they are, or you're not comfortable with in who they are, or something that just makes them different than who you are. When you begin attributing an employee's performance to what makes them different than you, I'm not saying you're necessarily wrong, just when you find that situation, check yourself and reflect on your biases just to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons. So the question always remains, diversity and inclusion. Are you doing it right or are you doing it wrong? Thank you so much for listening, and I hope this gets you to think more about the uniqueness and the value of that uniqueness of all your team members. And I'll be seeing you again soon. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.